On our 10th wedding anniversary, in front of our closest friends and family, my husband raised a champagne toast to new beginnings and announced he was leaving me for my younger sister. What he didn't know was that the anniversary gift box on my lap didn't contain the watch he was expecting. It held divorce papers I'd prepared 3 weeks earlier when I discovered their affair, along with evidence that would destroy not just his reputation, but his entire career. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I still remember the exact moment my perfect life began to unravel. It was an ordinary Tuesday in March, unseasonably warm for early spring in Chicago. I had left work early, planning to surprise my husband, Nathan, with tickets to the jazz festival he'd been hinting about for months. Our 10th anniversary was approaching in April, and I wanted to make it special, to remind us both of our first date at a tiny jazz club in the city where we'd fallen in love over blue notes and whiskey sours. The house was quiet when I arrived home, which wasn't unusual. Nathan often worked late at his law firm, especially since he'd been made partner the previous year. I kicked off my heels in the entryway and headed upstairs to hide the tickets in my jewelry box, the one place I knew Nathan never looked. That's when I heard it, the shower running in our master bathroom. My first thought was simple happiness. He was home early, too. Perhaps we could go out for an impromptu dinner date. I pushed open our bedroom door, a playful comment about joining him, in the shower already forming on my lips. It died instantly when I saw the unfamiliar handbag on our bed. Sleek, expensive leather in a distinctive coral shade I'd complimented just last month. When my sister Vanessa had bought it. For several seconds I couldn't move. My brain scrambled to find alternative explanations. But I already knew. The shower shut off, and I heard laughter. My sister's unmistakable laugh followed by my husband's low murmur. I backed out of the room silently, my heart hammering against my ribs so violently I was certain they could hear it. I drove aimlessly for hours, the jazz festival tickets crushed in my clenched fist. By the time I returned home, the house was empty, with only a hastily scribbled note from Nathan about an emergency client meeting, as evidence he'd been there at all. I sat at our kitchen island, staring at his familiar handwriting, and felt something cold and hard crystallize inside my chest. My sister called that evening, her voice artificially bright as she asked about my day. I answered with equal pretense, the familiar rhythm of our conversation suddenly grotesque in its normalcy. "How's work?" she asked. "Busy," I replied, thinking of the way her handbag had looked against our slate-gray bedspread. "What about you?" And she told me about a difficult client, never once mentioning that she'd spent the afternoon in my shower with my husband. That night, lying awake in our bed, the sheets I'd stripped and replaced still smelling faintly of Vanessa's distinctive perfume despite the fresh linens, I tried to pinpoint when it might have started. Nathan and Vanessa had always been friendly, perhaps unusually so. I'd been grateful for it, relieved that my husband and sister got along so well. How many times had I left them chatting at family gatherings while I helped our mother in the kitchen? How often had Nathan volunteered to pick Vanessa up from the airport when she visited from New York? I scrolled through months of text messages between Nathan and me, searching for clues I might have missed. Business trips that ran long, late nights at the office, weekend conferences that suddenly required his attendance. The signs had been there, but I'd been too trusting, too certain of my place in his life, to see them. Sleep finally came as dawn broke over the Chicago skyline, bringing with it a decision. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. Whatever happened next, I refused to be the hysterical wife, the betrayed sister, lashing out from pain. If this was ending, and in my heart I already knew it was, I would end it on my terms. The next morning, I called in sick to the architectural firm where I worked as a senior project manager. It was so out of character that my assistant, Marisa, asked twice if I was sure I didn't need anything. I assured her I was fine, just fighting a migraine. The lie came easily, the first of many I would tell in the coming weeks. I created a new email account using a name Nathan wouldn't recognize and contacted 3 divorce attorneys, scheduling consultations for the following day. Then I called our bank and requested a detailed statement of all our accounts for the past year. I wasn't just hurt, I was methodical. Every action was deliberate. Each step calculated to help me understand exactly what I was dealing with before deciding how to proceed. That afternoon, my phone chimed with a text from Nathan. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up," I replied. With a casual, "No problem. I have that presentation to prepare anyway," maintaining our facade of normalcy. He sent back a heart emoji, and I stared at it, wondering how he managed to text the same symbol to both sisters without his phone bursting into flames from the hypocrisy. The first attorney I met with, Philip Weber, occupied a sleek downtown office with views of Lake Michigan. He listened impassively as I outlined my situation, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and assessed me with eyes that had witnessed decades of marital dissolution. "Mrs. Reynolds, before we continue, I need to ask, are you certain you want a divorce? Many couples recover from infidelity with proper counseling." His tone was practiced, professional. "It's not just the affair," I replied, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "It's who he's having it with. My sister, Mr. Weber. My younger sister." Something flickered across his face, a brief crack in his professional veneer. "I see. That does complicate matters." He straightened the already immaculate stack of papers before him. "In that case, we need to discuss strategy. Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, but given your husband's position at his firm and your joint assets, there's much to consider." By the time I left Weber's office, I had a preliminary plan and a list of documents to gather. The weight in my chest hadn't lifted, but it had shifted somehow, becoming more purposeful. I wasn't just carrying pain now, I was carrying intention. The second attorney, Diane Myers, asked different questions, focusing on financial aspects. "Has there been any unusual activity in your joint accounts? Large withdrawals? New investments you weren't consulted on?" I admitted I didn't know yet, but would soon have the bank statements to review. Diane's lips pressed into a thin line. "Do that quickly. In my experience, once a spouse realizes their partner suspects something, assets have a way of becoming remarkably fluid." The third consultation with James Patterson, a divorce attorney known for handling high-profile cases discreetly, proved most enlightening. After hearing my story, he didn't immediately focus on the legal process, but instead, on my emotional state. "Mrs. Reynolds, what do you want from this process? Not just financially, but personally?" The question caught me off guard. What did I want? The obvious answer was to hurt Nathan and Vanessa as deeply as they'd hurt me, but saying it aloud felt petty, beneath the person I believed myself to be. I began, then paused, searching for the truth. "I want to emerge from this with my dignity intact. I want to understand how the 2 people I trusted most could betray me so completely. And I want to ensure that I'm protected. That the decade I invested in building a life with Nathan isn't simply erased." Patterson nodded slowly. "Those are good starting points. Now let's talk about how we get there while causing the least damage to you in the process." I chose Patterson as my attorney, his balanced approach resonating with something deep inside me that wasn't yet ready to burn everything to the ground despite the inferno of betrayal raging through my chest. That evening, I created a detailed timeline of Nathan's behavior over the past year, noting every late night, every business trip, every instance when he and Vanessa might have had the opportunity to be together. Patterns emerged that I'd been blind to. His Chicago conferences coinciding with Vanessa's shopping weekends away from New York. Family gatherings where they both disappeared for stretches of time. returning separately with plausible explanations. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. No one questioned. The bank statements arrived 2 days later, revealing irregularities I might never have noticed had I not been specifically looking for them. Small transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Charges at hotels in the city. Never extravagant enough to flag my attention, but consistent enough to establish a pattern. Dinner receipts for 2 at restaurants. Nathan had never mentioned visiting. Most damning was a jewelry purchase from 3 months earlier, a significant amount spent at Tiffany's that hadn't resulted in any gift to me. My birthday had passed without jewelry, as had Christmas. The ghost of a gift given to someone else, to Vanessa, haunted that line item. Tangible. Proof of his deception. I debated whether to confront Nathan immediately, but decided against it. Our anniversary was approaching, an event we'd always celebrated with friends and family. Nathan had been the one to suggest a larger gathering this year, booking a private room at Lavinia, an upscale restaurant overlooking the river. At the time, I'd been touched by his enthusiasm for commemorating our decade together. Now I understood his motivation differently. A public setting would prevent any serious conversation about our marriage, allowing him to maintain appearances while he prepared for whatever came next. During this period of investigation, I maintained a flawless performance of normalcy. I cooked Nathan's favorite meals, laughed at his jokes, and even attended a dinner party at his senior partner's home where I chatted animatedly about summer vacation plans I knew we'd never take. Each night, I lay beside him in bed, my body. Rigid with tension, he never seemed to notice, wondering how the man I'd pledged my life to could sleep so peacefully while living such a profound lie. Vanessa called twice that week, each conversation a masterclass in deception. She asked about anniversary plans with seemingly genuine interest, even offering to help coordinate the celebration. 10 years is a big deal, Elise, she said, her voice warm with what I'd once mistaken for sisterly affection. You two should do something really special. Nathan's handling most of it, I replied, picturing her coral handbag on my bed. He's been very invested in making sure everything is perfect. That sounds like him, she agreed, and I heard the smile in her voice, a private pleasure that twisted something sharp inside my chest. Always the perfectionist. Always, I echoed, thinking of the hotel receipts, the carefully orchestrated alibis, the calculated betrayal executed with precision over what appeared to be months, if not longer. Yes, Nathan had always been meticulous in everything he did, including, apparently, infidelity. The week before our anniversary, I met again with James Patterson, presenting the financial evidence I'd gathered. His expression remained professional, but I caught the flicker of satisfaction as he reviewed my organized documentation. This is excellent work, Mrs. Reynolds. Most clients arrive with emotions but little concrete evidence. He tapped the folder containing bank statements, annotated with my observations. You've given us a strong foundation. What happens next? I asked, surprised by the calm in my voice. That depends on you, Patterson replied. We can file immediately, or we can prepare everything and wait for your signal. He hesitated, studying my face. May I ask if you've chosen a particular timing? I thought of the anniversary dinner, of Nathan's insistence on celebrating publicly, of Vanessa's confirmed attendance as part of our closest circle. Something cold and decisive settled in my chest. Our anniversary is next Saturday, I said slowly. I believe that would be an appropriate moment, don't you? A clean demarcation between one decade and whatever comes next. Patterson nodded, his expression revealing neither approval nor judgment. If that's your decision, we'll have everything ready. He opened a desk drawer and removed a manila envelope. These are the initial divorce papers. Once signed, we can file them immediately. I'll prepare a complete package with the financial documentation as exhibits. I took the envelope, its weight insignificant compared to the burden I'd carried since discovering the affair. "Thank you." The remaining days passed in a blur of controlled emotions and careful planning. I maintained my role as the unsuspecting wife while finalizing every detail of my response. I chose my outfit for the anniversary dinner with deliberate care, not the red dress Nathan had mentioned hoping I'd wear, but a sleek black ensemble that made me feel armored, protected. I arranged for a separate car service to be waiting outside the restaurant, ensuring I'd have transportation home regardless of how the evening unfolded. Most crucially, I prepared what I would say, not an emotional outburst, but a measured response. That would make clear I was not a victim, but a woman reclaiming her dignity. I rehearsed these words alone in my car during lunch breaks, perfecting a tone that conveyed strength rather than spite. The day before our anniversary, I visited my mother, ostensibly to borrow a piece of jewelry for the celebration. In reality, I needed to look into the eyes of the woman who had raised both Vanessa and me to search for any sign that she might have suspected what was happening. I found nothing but genuine excitement about our milestone, her innocence another casualty in the expanding circle of this betrayal. 10 years, she marveled, clasping my hands in hers. Your father and I are so proud of the marriage you and Nathan have built. Such a strong foundation. I smiled and accepted the pearl earrings she insisted I borrow, treasures from her own anniversary celebrations years ago. My throat tightened as she fastened them to my ears, her touch gentle with maternal pride. Whatever happened tomorrow, this woman, who had taught me about integrity and resilience, would be wounded by the actions of her daughters and son-in-law. That night, Nathan presented me with a small gift box, wrapped in silver paper with an elaborate bow. "A little pre-anniversary token," he explained with a smile that once would have melted my heart. "Just something to show how much these 10 years have meant to me." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet, beautiful but impersonal. The kind of gift you might give a valued colleague rather than a spouse of a decade. I thanked him with appropriate enthusiasm, wondering if Vanessa had received the Tiffany purchase, with similar pretense of gratitude. As Nathan showered before bed, I slipped the divorce papers into a gift box identical to the one my bracelet had come in, wrapping it with the same silver paper and an indistinguishable bow. I placed it in my dresser drawer, ready to be transferred to my handbag before we left for the restaurant tomorrow. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, mentally rehearsing the events to come, strengthening my resolve. Beside me, Nathan slept, soundly, his breathing deep and regular, unburdened by the weight of deception that had become so normalized in his life. In the darkness, I studied his profile, the man I had loved, the stranger he had become, and felt a curious detachment, as if I were already observing him from the distance of a future where he was no longer central to my existence. Morning. Arrived with a flurry of text messages, well wishes from friends who would join us that evening. A particularly effusive message from Vanessa expressing excitement about celebrating my favorite couple. Nathan was attentive throughout the day, bringing me coffee in bed, suggesting a walk along the lakefront for old times' sake. I participated in these anniversary rituals while carrying the knowledge that by nightfall, everything would be irrevocably altered. As I dressed for dinner, applying makeup with methodical precision, I caught Nathan watching me in the mirror, an unreadable expression crossing his face. For a moment, I wondered if he sensed what was coming, if some instinct warned him that the carefully constructed facade of our marriage was hours away from shattering. But then he smiled, complimenting my appearance with practiced charm, and I understood that his confidence remained absolute. He believed himself too clever, his deception too perfect to be discovered. I transferred the gift box containing divorce papers to my evening bag, a final piece sliding into place. Whatever happened next, I was prepared. Not just legally or financially, but emotionally. The woman who would walk into Lavinia tonight was not the same one who had discovered a coral handbag on her bed weeks earlier. That woman had been blindsided by betrayal. This one was walking deliberately into a confrontation of her own design. As we drove to the restaurant, Nathan reached for my hand, his fingers warm against mine. "Happy anniversary, Elise," he said, his voice tender with what anyone else would interpret as genuine emotion. "Here's to the next 10 years being even better than the first." I smiled and turned to look out the window at the Chicago skyline glittering against the darkening sky. "Yes," I replied softly. "Here's to exactly what we both deserve." The morning after I placed the divorce papers in my gift box, I woke with unexpected clarity. The initial shock of betrayal had crystallized into something sharper, more focused. I needed to understand not just the affair itself, but its full extent. How deep the deception ran, who else might be involved, and what Nathan and Vanessa were planning. Their betrayal had blindsided me once. I wouldn't allow it to happen again. I started at the one place I knew held secrets, Nathan's home office. He'd left early for a pre-anniversary breakfast with the partners, another convenient absence I now questioned. His sleek mahogany desk, usually impeccably organized, revealed nothing unusual at first glance. I knew his computer would be password protected, and attempting to access it might alert him to my suspicions. Instead, I focused on physical evidence, methodically searching each drawer with careful attention to returning everything exactly as I found it. Behind a stack of legal journals in the bottom drawer, I discovered a burner phone, basic, inexpensive, the kind used in crime dramas for untraceable communications. My hands trembled slightly as I turned it on. No password protection. Nathan, always so careful, had grown complacent in his deception. The text messages between him and V stretched back 7 months, far longer than I'd initially suspected. I forced myself to read them chronologically, tracking the evolution of their betrayal from flirtatious exchanges to explicit coordination of their meetings. What struck me most wasn't the romantic language or sexual references, but the casual discussion of their future plans. "E suspects nothing," Nathan had written just 3 weeks ago. "After the anniversary dinner, we can start the next phase." Vanessa's reply chilled me. "Perfect timing. My lease is up in May, and the Chicago office has approved my transfer request. Everything's falling into place." They weren't just having an affair. They were orchestrating a complete life transition, with my sister preparing to move from New York to Chicago permanently. The next phase clearly involved Nathan leaving me, their relationship becoming public, and them building a life together, all carefully timed to follow our 10th anniversary celebration. I photographed key messages with my own phone, then returned. The burner exactly as I'd found it. The calculated nature of their betrayal, its meticulous planning and cold execution, transformed something inside me. My pain didn't disappear, but it hardened into resolution. My next step led me to Nathan's law firm under the guise of surprising him with lunch. He wasn't there, of course. Another lie exposed. But his absence gave me the opportunity to chat with his assistant, Deborah, whom I'd known since Nathan joined the firm 8 years ago. "He's been so busy lately," I commented, setting down the lunch bag I'd brought. "All these extra hours and weekend conferences must be exhausting." Deborah's expression flickered, a momentary hesitation before she smiled. "Yes, the Brooks merger has everyone working overtime." "The Brooks merger?" I feigned recognition. "That's the one in Philadelphia, right? Nathan mentioned flying there twice last month." "Philadelphia?" Confusion crossed her face. "No, Brooks Industries is based in Milwaukee, and the team's only had one meeting there so far." She immediately seemed to realize her mistake, backtracking quickly. "But Nathan's been handling several cases simultaneously. I might be mixing things up." I maintained my pleasant expression while mentally noting this confirmation of Nathan's fabricated business trips. "Of course." It's hard to keep track of everything. Would you mind giving him this when he returns? I need to get back to work. I placed the lunch bag on her desk, knowing it would sit there unclaimed, further evidence of his absence. As I walked through the firm's glass doors, I texted my friend Zoe, a real estate agent who had helped us find our home 5 years ago. Need to meet ASAP, professional question. She responded immediately, suggesting coffee that afternoon at a small cafe near her office. Zoe's expression grew increasingly grave as I explained my situation, carefully omitting any emotional language, presenting it as a practical problem, requiring solution. I need to know if there's been any activity regarding our property, I concluded. Any inquiries, appraisals, or discussions about listing that I haven't been informed about. She hesitated, professional ethics clearly at war with personal loyalty. Elise, I'd need your permission to look into this officially. You have it, I assured her. I'm not asking you to break any confidentiality agreements. I just need to know if my name is being removed from anything that should include me. The following day, Zoe called with information that confirmed my worst suspicions. There was an appraisal of your property 3 weeks ago, she reported. Requested by Nathan through Bradley Morton at Westside Realty. Bradley Morton? I repeated, the name unfamiliar. Yes, he specializes in quick, discreet sales for high-value properties. Her voice softened with concern. Elise, this type of pre-listing appraisal typically precedes a rapid sale, and Nathan specifically instructed that all communications go through him alone. Another piece of the puzzle snapped into place. Nathan wasn't just planning to leave me. He was preparing to liquidate our shared assets quickly, potentially before I realized what was happening. The timing aligned perfectly with his next phase mentioned in the text messages. Is there any way to prevent this? I asked. As co-owner, you have equal rights to the property, Zoe explained. Any sale requires your signature, but... She paused, choosing her words carefully. There are ways a spouse can apply pressure or create situations where the other party feels compelled to sell. I thanked her for the information, my mind already formulating countermeasures. That evening, I contacted James Patterson again, updating him on my discoveries. This changes our strategy, he advised. We need to place a legal hold on your joint assets immediately after filing. Given what you've discovered about the property appraisal, I recommend we prepare injunctions to prevent any sale or transfer of significant assets without court approval. How quickly can we implement this? I asked. The moment you're ready to file, he assured me. I'll have everything prepared for immediate action. The next thread I pulled came from an unexpected source. During a routine scroll through my credit card statement, I noticed a recurring charge to a storage facility across town. It was modest enough to have escaped attention, $89 monthly for the past 4 months, but I had no knowledge of any storage unit rental. The facility manager was initially reluctant to discuss the account, but became more cooperative when I presented identification and marriage documentation. The unit was rented in both your names, he explained, pulling up the contract on his computer. But we've only ever seen Mr. Reynolds accessing it. I've misplaced my key, I explained with an embarrassed smile. Is there any way to verify my identity so I can access our unit today? 20 minutes and several forms later, I stood before a small storage unit containing 4 large designer suitcases and several sealed boxes. The suitcases held carefully folded men's clothing, Nathan's sizes, but items I'd never seen before. New purchases, perhaps, or clothes he'd gradually removed from our home without my noticing. The boxes contained framed photographs from his office, personal documents, and various mementos. A curated selection of his life, packaged and ready for transport. Most revealing was a leather portfolio hidden beneath the clothing. Inside were apartment listings in the Gold Coast area, luxury buildings with doormen and lake views, all significantly more expensive than our current home. Several had been highlighted, with notes in Nathan's handwriting about square footage and proximity to his firm. This wasn't just preparation for leaving me. It was systematic planning for an upgraded lifestyle with my sister. I photographed everything, then carefully returned the items exactly as I'd found them. Before leaving, I slipped a small GPS tracker inside the lining of one suitcase, a device I'd purchased after discovering the burner phone, unsure then how I might use it. That evening, Nathan suggested we enjoy a special dinner at home. Just the two of us before tomorrow's celebration. He cooked his signature pasta dish, opened an expensive bottle of wine, and reminisced about our early days together. The performance was flawless. Loving husband honoring a decade of marriage, eyes warm with apparent affection as he toasted, "The best decision I ever made." I matched his performance measure for measure, laughing at his stories, touching his hand across the table, playing the role of contented wife while mentally cataloging each lie. When he leaned in to kiss me, I detected an unfamiliar perfume. Subtle but distinct, another careless oversight on his part. Vanessa's scent clung to him, invisible but undeniable. I returned his kiss with practiced response, wondering if he could sense my revulsion, if he even cared. Later, as he slept beside me, I slipped into the guest bathroom with my phone. My mother had called earlier, and I needed to return her call without Nathan overhearing. "I'm just confirming you're both still coming for brunch on Sunday," she said when she answered. "I've planned a special post-anniversary celebration." The thought of facing my mother after tomorrow's inevitable confrontation made my stomach twist. "About Sunday," I began carefully. "Things might be complicated after tomorrow." "Complicated?" Her voice sharpened with concern. "Elise, what's wrong?" I hesitated, torn between protecting her and preparing her. "Mom, I've discovered something about Nathan and Vanessa, something I'll be addressing at the dinner tomorrow." Silence stretched between us, heavy with implication. "Tell me," she finally said, her voice stripped of its usual warmth. I outlined the situation in clinical terms, sparing her the intimate details, while ensuring she understood the magnitude of the betrayal. When I finished, her breathing was the only sound for several long moments. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "About 3 weeks," I admitted. "I needed time to investigate, to be certain." "And you're absolutely sure?" "Yes. There's no misunderstanding. It's been going on for at least 7 months, possibly longer." Another silence, then, "What do you need from me?" The question caught me off guard. I'd expected shock, denial, perhaps even an instinctive defense of Vanessa. Instead, my mother offered immediate practical support. "Just be prepared for what happens after tomorrow," I said. "Things will change quickly, and I might need somewhere to stay temporarily." "Your room is exactly as you left it," she replied without hesitation. "And Elise? I am so sorry that they've done this to you, but I'm not surprised by how you're handling it." Her words steadied me, a reminder that long before I was Nathan's wife or Vanessa's sister, I was Margaret Chen's daughter, raised to face challenges with dignity and resilience. The next morning, our anniversary day, I contacted Melissa Wong, the executive assistant to Lawrence Harrison, managing partner at Nathan's firm. Melissa and I had bonded years ago at firm holiday parties, maintaining a friendly relationship despite infrequent contact. I requested an urgent meeting with Harrison, explaining only that it concerned a matter of professional ethics involving Nathan. Harrison agreed to see me during his lunch hour, his expression grave as I entered his corner office overlooking the Chicago River. "Mrs. Reynolds, this is unexpected. What can I do for you?" I placed a folder on his desk, containing copies of financial documents I'd discovered during my investigation, evidence not just of Nathan's personal betrayal, but of professional misconduct that would interest the firm considerably. "I believe Nathan has been diverting client funds," I stated calmly. "Initially, I noticed irregularities in our personal finances. Further investigation revealed a pattern of concerning transactions. Harrison's expression remained neutral as he examined the documents, but the tightening around his eyes betrayed his recognition of the seriousness. These allegations are significant. May I ask why you're bringing this to me rather than to the appropriate authorities? Professional courtesy, I replied. Before I take this information elsewhere, I wanted to give the firm the opportunity to address it internally. I understand the reputational implications. What I didn't explicitly state, but Harrison clearly understood, was the leverage this information provided. Nathan's misconduct could damage the firm's reputation and potentially expose them to liability. That I possessed this knowledge and was willing to provide the firm time to manage it created an implicit arrangement beneficial to both of us. Appreciate your discretion, Mrs. Reynolds. Rest assured, we take such matters extremely seriously. He closed the folder, his expression somber. May I ask what prompted this investigation? I discovered Nathan has been unfaithful, I answered. Simply. That discovery led me to examine our finances more carefully, which revealed these discrepancies. Harrison nodded slowly, understanding the subtext. The firm will need time to verify these allegations and determine an appropriate response. Of course, I agreed, standing to leave. I'd appreciate being kept informed of any conclusions you reach. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone chimed with a text from Vanessa. Can't wait to celebrate you two tonight. I have a surprise announcement. Of my own to share. The audacity nearly made me laugh. Her surprise announcement would undoubtedly involve her transfer to Chicago. Perhaps even a veiled reference to new beginnings that only she and Nathan would fully understand. The dramatic irony was almost too perfect. My sister planning to use my anniversary dinner to set the stage for her relationship with my husband. My final preparatory step involved Teresa Gallegos, the maitre d' at Lavinia, who had coordinated our anniversary celebration. I'd met her several times while confirming arrangements over the past weeks. Mrs. Reynolds, everything is set for this evening, she assured me when I arrived at the restaurant early that afternoon. The private dining room has been prepared, exactly as requested. Thank you, Teresa. There's one additional arrangement I'd like to make. I explained my need for a second gift box to be presented at a specific moment during the evening, different from the one I would bring myself. It's a surprise for my husband, I explained with a smile that Teresa returned warmly. Of course, we're accustomed to assisting with anniversary surprises. She made a note in her tablet. Would you like this presented with dessert? Actually, I'd prefer it be brought out after my husband gives his toast. He's planning something special, and I'd like my gift to follow immediately after. Consider it done, Teresa confirmed, adding the instruction to her notes. As I left Lavinia, I received a call from James Patterson. Everything is prepared as we discussed, he reported. The moment you give the word, we can file the divorce petition and the emergency motion to freeze assets simultaneously. Thank you, James. I anticipate we'll be proceeding tomorrow morning. I've arranged for my associate to be on call this evening, should you need immediate legal support following the dinner. Her number is in the text I just sent. I thanked him, again, appreciating the thoroughness of his preparations. As the afternoon progressed, I finalized my own arrangements with methodical precision, confirming the car service that would wait outside Lavinia, ensuring the second set of documents was properly positioned within the gift box Teresa would present, and reviewing one last time the evidence I had compiled. By the time Nathan returned home to prepare for our anniversary dinner, I had transformed our guest room into a command center of sorts. Every piece of evidence strategically organized, copies secured in multiple locations, and key players positioned exactly where they needed to be. You look stunning, Nathan said as I emerged from our bedroom in my black dress, his eyes appreciative in a way that once would have pleased me. Now I recognized the gaze for what it was, assessment of an object, not admiration of a partner. You look perfect too, I replied, adjusting his tie with practiced intimacy. Ready to celebrate 10 years? He captured my hand, kissing it with theatrical affection. More than ready. Tonight will be unforgettable. Yes, I agreed, meeting his eyes directly. I believe it will be. As we drove to Lavinia, I felt a strange calm descend. All the pieces were in place. The investigation phase was complete. Everything I had discovered, from the burner phone to the storage unit, from the financial improprieties to the planned property sale, had been documented and incorporated into my response strategy. Nothing Nathan or Vanessa could say or do tonight would catch me unprepared. The restaurant's valet opened my door, and Nathan extended his hand to help me from the car, the picture of attentive husband. Above us, the elegant facade of Lavinia glowed against the darkening Chicago sky, its windows illuminated with warm light that spilled onto the sidewalk. Somewhere inside, our friends and family were gathering, unwitting participants in the EI drama about to unfold. Nathan leaned close as we approached the entrance, his breath warm against my ear. Happy anniversary, darling. Here's to new beginnings. I smiled, my hand tightening around the clutch containing my gift box of divorce papers. Yes, Nathan. To new beginnings indeed. Teresa Gallegos greeted us at Lavinia's entrance, her professional smile revealing nothing of our earlier conversation. Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, congratulations on your anniversary. Your guests are gathering in the Azure Room. She led us through the restaurant's main dining area, where patrons turned to watch our procession. The handsome couple celebrating a decade of marriage, the very image of success and stability. Nathan's hand rested on the small of my back, guiding me with the proprietary confidence of a man who believed he controlled not just this moment, but the narrative of our lives. I allowed his touch, conscious that within hours it would be the last time he would ever lay hands on me with such presumption. The Azure Room had been transformed for our celebration. Soft lighting illuminated tables adorned with arrangements of white roses and blue hydrangeas. A string quartet played in the corner, their rendition of our wedding song creating an atmosphere of elegant nostalgia. Champagne flowed freely as 30 of our closest friends and family mingled, their genuine happiness for our milestone a stark contrast to the reality about to unfold. My mother stood near the windows, elegant in navy blue, her expression composed despite our conversation the previous night. She embraced me with unusual fierceness, whispering, "I'm right here," before turning to greet Nathan with perfect social grace, not a hint of her knowledge visible in her demeanor. Vanessa arrived moments later, stunning in a coral dress that perfectly matched her infamous handbag. The color choice couldn't be coincidental, a private joke between her and Nathan, perhaps, or a subtle declaration of territory. She embraced us both, her performance flawless as she exclaimed over the beautiful venue and presented an elaborately wrapped gift. "Open it later," she insisted with a meaningful glance at Nathan that anyone else might have interpreted as simple celebration excitement. "It's something special for your new chapter." I accepted the package with a warm smile. How thoughtful. "We'll definitely be entering a new chapter after tonight." The subtle emphasis in my response went unnoticed by Vanessa, who had already turned to greet other guests. Nathan squeezed my shoulder before moving to welcome his law partners, leaving me momentarily alone with the gift. I placed it carefully on the designated table alongside other presents, positioning my own gift box, containing the divorce papers, prominently at the front. Dinner proceeded with orchestrated precision. Course after course of exquisite cuisine arrived as conversations flowed around me. I participated fully, laughing at appropriate moments, sharing rehearsed anecdotes about our marriage when prompted, all while observing the subtle exchanges between Nathan and Vanessa, a glance held too long, fingers brushing during a champagne toast, the synchronization of their movements, unconscious but revealing. Throughout the meal, I also noted who sat, where, who spoke with whom, mentally cataloging the witnesses to what would follow. Nathan's parents, conservative and proper, occupied a place of honor near us. His father had always treated me with reserved politeness, while his mother had embraced me as the daughter she never had. Their inevitable pain added another layer to the evening's emotional complexity. My close friend Diane, who had supported me through the deaths of my father and grandfather, sat nearby with her husband. She would be a crucial ally in the aftermath. Nathan's colleague Robert, who had recently gone through a difficult divorce himself, would likely recognize the legal maneuvers about to unfold. By dessert, the atmosphere had reached the perfect pitch of celebratory warmth. The timing couldn't have been more ideal when Nathan stood, champagne flute in hand, commanding attention with practiced ease. The room quieted immediately, all eyes turning to the man of the hour. 10 years ago, he began, his voice carrying effortlessly, I made the best decision of my life by marrying Elise. Appreciative murmurs rippled through the room. We've built something beautiful together, a partnership, a home, a life that has exceeded all my expectations. I watched him deliver this speech, fascinated by his ability to speak these words while planning their complete dismantling. His eyes shone with what any observer would interpret as devotion. Only I recognized the subtle tells of his deception, the slight tension in his jaw, the calculated modulation of his voice, the careful positioning of his body to include Vanessa in his sightline. However, he continued, his tone shifting subtly, life is about growth and evolution, about recognizing when one chapter ends and another begins. A curious hush fell over the room. This deviation from standard anniversary sentiments caught everyone's attention, everyone except Vanessa, whose expression revealed anticipation rather than surprise. Elise and I have reached a crossroads, Nathan announced, his gaze now fixed somewhere above the heads of our guests, rather than meeting my eyes directly. A moment of transition that, while difficult, is necessary for both of us to move forward. Authentically. I felt the collective confusion ripple through the room. My mother's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. Nathan's parents exchanged bewildered glances. Only Vanessa remained perfectly still, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Tonight isn't just about celebrating the past, Nathan continued, his voice strengthening with rehearsed conviction. It's about honesty regarding the future. And honesty compels me to share that Elise and I will be parting ways. The shocked silence that followed was absolute. Even the quartet stopped playing, the final notes of their piece fading into the stunned void. Nathan pushed forward, seemingly emboldened by having crossed the Rubicon of his announcement. We've grown in different directions, and we've both recognized that continuing our marriage would mean compromising our individual happiness. He gestured toward me with his champagne glass, a magnanimous acknowledgement of my supposed agreement with this narrative. While the timing of this announcement may seem unusual, we felt that sharing it with those closest to us, those who have witnessed our journey, was the respectful choice. The absolute audacity of his performance, presenting our dissolution as a mutual decision, positioning himself as the forthright truth-teller, almost made me laugh. Instead, I maintained perfect composure, allowing him to continue digging his elaborate grave. And in the spirit of complete honesty, Nathan pivoted slightly toward Vanessa, whose expression now blended triumph with affected solemnity. I should also share that I've found a connection that represents this new chapter in my life. He extended his hand toward my sister, who rose gracefully to stand beside him. Vanessa and I have developed feelings for each other that we can no longer deny. While the timing is unfortunate, the heart wants what it wants. The collective gasp that rippled through the room would have been comical in any other context. Nathan's mother pressed her hand to her chest. His father's expression hardened to granite, and various friends displayed reactions ranging from open-mouthed shock to uncomfortable fascination. My mother alone remained composed, her eyes fixed on me rather than the spectacle before us. We didn't plan for this to happen, Vanessa added, her voice carrying the practiced tremor of someone presenting passion as justification for betrayal. We fought it for months, But sometimes, life presents you with unexpected paths to happiness. The rehearsed quality of their announcement confirmed what I already knew. This performance had been planned in detail, practiced perhaps in private, moments between illicit meetings, calibrated for maximum impact with minimum resistance. They had anticipated shock followed by reluctant acceptance, counting on social discomfort to prevent direct confrontation. What they hadn't anticipated was my preparation. I waited until Nathan finished with a somber, "We hope for your understanding," during this transition, before rising slowly from my seat. The room's attention shifted immediately, guests desperate for my reaction to this public humiliation. "Thank you, Nathan, for that illuminating toast," I began, my voice steady and clear. "And thank you, Vanessa, for the clarification." I reached for my water glass rather than champagne, lifting it in a deliberate counter to their celebratory gesture. "I would like to offer a toast of my own." Nathan's expression flickered briefly with uncertainty. This deviation from the expected script of shocked silence or emotional breakdown visibly unsettled him. "First, to honesty," I said, maintaining direct eye contact with Nathan. "A value I've always cherished, even when it's been notably absent from my marriage. And to timing, which, as my husband noted, is indeed remarkable today." I set down my glass carefully before continuing. "Nathan speaks of a crossroads, of chapters ending and beginning. What he failed to mention is that this particular chapter has been under revision for at least 7 months. Confusion creased Nathan's brow as I moved toward the gift table. "I discovered your affair 3 weeks ago," I continued, addressing them both with calm precision. "The day I came home early and found Vanessa's coral handbag on our bed. The day I heard her laughter from our shower." Vanessa paled visibly, her composed facade cracking. Nathan's hand tightened around his champagne flute, knuckles whitening with tension. "Since that day, I've conducted a thorough investigation," I continued, picking up my gift box. "I found your burner phone, Nathan, with every message between you and my sister. I discovered the storage unit where you've been gathering your belongings. I learned about the property appraisal you commissioned without my knowledge, preparing to sell our home out from under me." Each revelation landed like a physical blow. Nathan's parents turned to stare at him with dawning horror. Various guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, witnessing a public dismantling more thorough than anything they had anticipated when accepting the dinner invitation. Most illuminating, however, was discovering the extent of your professional misconduct. I watched Nathan's expression transform from discomfort to genuine alarm. "The financial improprieties at your firm make for fascinating reading. Your managing partner certainly thought so when I met with him this morning." "Elise," Nathan warned, his voice low and dangerous, "you're making a scene." "No, Nathan, you made the scene." I gestured around the room. "You orchestrated this entire performance, this anniversary dinner, this public announcement of your relationship with my sister. You carefully planned my humiliation as a spectacle for our friends and family." I approached them slowly, the gift box held before me like an offering. "What you didn't plan for was my preparation. You see, while you were crafting this dramatic revelation, I was preparing a response." I extended the box toward Nathan. "Happy anniversary." Reflexively, he took it, suspicion warring with confusion in his expression. "Open it," I encouraged, echoing Vanessa's earlier words. "It's something special for your new chapter." With visible reluctance, Nathan removed the silver paper, lifted the lid, and stared at the divorce papers nestled within. His face drained of color as he registered the legal documents, the highlighted signature lines, the attached financial disclosures. "I had these prepared 2 weeks ago," I explained, my voice carrying easily in the silent room. "My attorney has a complete file, documenting the affair, the hidden assets, and the professional misconduct. By tomorrow morning, the emergency motion to freeze our accounts will be approved, preventing the asset liquidation you've been planning." Vanessa took a step backward, distancing herself physically from Nathan as the full implications became clear. This wasn't the clean break they had anticipated, the straightforward transition to their new life together. This was exposure, consequences, complications. "You've been planning this all along," Nathan accused, his voice tight with anger. "Setting me up." "No, Nathan. I've been responding to what you planned. There's a difference." I turned to address our stunned guests directly. "I apologize for the unexpected theater this evening has become. I had hoped to handle this privately, but Nathan and Vanessa's decision to make their announcement tonight forced my hand. At that moment, Teresa appeared at my side. "Mrs. Reynolds, the second gift you arranged has arrived." On cue, a server entered carrying another box, identical in size and wrapping to the one containing the divorce papers. I accepted it with a grateful nod. "This one is for you, Vanessa," I said, offering it to my sister. "Something to commemorate your new beginning." Wariness clouded her features as she accepted the package. With visible reluctance, she removed the wrapping and lifted the lid. Her sharp inhale was audible as she registered the contents. Printed copies of the text messages between her and Nathan, along with photographs of the storage unit contents and documentation of Nathan's financial misconduct. "You should know what you're getting," I explained, my voice gentler than I had intended. "The man you're choosing has systematically deceived his wife, misappropriated client funds, and planned to manipulate financial assets illegally. You're not getting the Nathan Reynolds who appears on charity boards and makes partner at prestigious firms. You're getting the man who orchestrated this deception." I turned to address the room once more. Again, I apologize for the disruption to what should have been a celebration. Please enjoy the remainder of your evening. The dinner and drinks have been paid for in full. I retrieved my clutch from my chair and walked with measured steps toward my mother, who had risen to meet me. The shock on the faces we passed registered distantly, secondary to the liberating knowledge that the confrontation was complete. I had said exactly what needed saying, revealed precisely what required revelation. "Ready?" my mother murmured as she reached my side. "Completely," I confirmed, accepting her arm. As we approached the exit, Nathan's voice rang out behind us. "This isn't over, Elise." I paused in the doorway, turning to meet his gaze one final time. "Actually, Nathan, that's exactly what it is. Over." The night air felt cleansing against my skin as we stepped outside. The car service I'd arranged waited at the curb, door already open. Behind us, raised voices emanated from the Azure room. Nathan and Vanessa arguing, guests exclaiming, the controlled narrative disintegrating into chaos. "You were magnificent," my mother said quietly as we settled into the back seat. "Your father would have been so proud." I exhaled deeply, feeling the tension of weeks begin to dissolve. "I didn't want this outcome, Mom. I really did love him." "I know you did." She squeezed my hand. "But sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is walking away from people who never deserved you in the first place." As our car pulled away from Lavinia, I caught a glimpse of Nathan bursting onto the sidewalk, his face contorted with frustration as he scanned the departing vehicles. Our eyes met briefly through the window, a final moment of recognition before the distance between us expanded, literal and figurative. I had entered Lavinia as Nathan Reynolds's wife, walking the path he had laid out, playing the role he had assigned me. I left as Elise Chen, the architect of my own next chapter, navigating a future suddenly wide open with painful but genuine possibility. The morning after the anniversary dinner dawned with a surreal quietness. I woke in my childhood bedroom, momentarily disoriented by the familiar ceiling I hadn't slept under in over a decade. My mother had converted the space into a home office years ago, but the essential character remained. The same pale blue walls, the window overlooking the Japanese maple that had shaded my teenage daydreams. She'd kept my old desk, now bearing her computer instead of my high school textbooks. The night before, She'd cleared it quickly, making space for the essentials I'd brought with me. My phone displayed 17 missed calls and 32 text messages, a digital avalanche of reactions to the previous night's events. Friends expressing shock and support. Nathan's parents requesting we discuss this situation rationally. Colleagues who had attended the dinner offering refuge and assistance. Notably absent were communications from Nathan or Vanessa. Their silence spoke volumes about the effectiveness of my counterattack. I scrolled briefly through the messages, responding only to James Patterson's confirmation that the emergency motion to freeze assets had been granted and the divorce petition officially filed. The judge was particularly interested in the financial documentation, he noted. We're in an advantageous position moving forward. Downstairs, I found my mother preparing breakfast with the same efficiency she'd applied to every crisis throughout. My life, the death of my father when I was 16, my grandfather's long illness, her own battle with breast cancer 5 years ago. Margaret Chen approached difficulties with practical action, creating order from chaos through the simple rituals of daily life. I spoke with Diane this morning, she informed me, setting a cup of coffee before me. She's gathered your essential items from the house. Nathan apparently didn't return home last night. Where did she leave everything? I asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. Her guest room. You can stay there if you prefer, or remain here as long as needed. She hesitated, then added, The lock on your home has been changed as you requested. The security company was very accommodating given the circumstances. The practical steps I'd set in motion the previous day were proceeding as planned. The locksmith had been scheduled before we'd even left for the anniversary dinner, instructed to change the locks immediately following confirmation from Diane that Nathan hadn't returned to the property. It was a precautionary measure, legally justified given the documented evidence of his intent to sell the property without my consent. I'll stay here for now, I decided. It gives me distance to think clearly. My mother nodded, her expression carefully neutral. And Vanessa? Have you heard anything? Nothing. The absence of communication from my sister created a curious hollow space beneath my ribs, not quite pain, but a negative pressure where family connection should exist. I suspect she's recalibrating her approach. Last night didn't follow their script. No, it certainly didn't. A hint of fierce pride flickered across my mother's face. You changed the narrative entirely. The morning passed in practical activities, retrieving items from Diane's home, speaking with my firm to arrange a week's leave, transferring personal documents to secure cloud storage that Nathan couldn't access. These tasks anchored me in the present, preventing the emotional undertow from pulling me into unproductive waters of anger or regret. Shortly after noon, an unexpected visitor arrived. Robert Chen, no relation to our family despite the shared surname, was Nathan's colleague and among the witnesses to the previous night's revelations. His expression was grave as my mother showed him into the living room. Elise, I apologize. For coming unannounced, he began, declining the offered seat. I felt you should be informed immediately. There's significant activity at the firm this morning. What kind of activity? I asked, though I had anticipated something like this. Lawrence Harrison called an emergency partners meeting. Nathan has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation of the financial concerns you raised. Robert shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't included in the senior partners discussion, but the accounting department has been locked down since dawn. External auditors arrived an hour ago. I see. The wheels I'd set in motion were turning at a pace even I hadn't anticipated. There's more, Robert continued. Nathan arrived demanding access to his office and files. When security denied him entry, he became vocal. Security escorted him from the building. The image of Nathan, always so controlled, so conscious of appearances, creating a scene in the firm's impressive lobby was difficult to reconcile with the man I'd known. His carefully constructed professional persona had begun to crack under pressure, revealing something less polished beneath. "Thank you for letting me know," I said sincerely. "I appreciate your coming here." "We've been colleagues for 8 years," Robert replied. "What happened between you and Nathan is personal. Business, but the professional implications affect many people." He hesitated before adding, "For what it's worth, the general sentiment at the firm supports your actions. Nathan's behavior has raised serious questions about his judgment." After Robert departed, I contacted James Patterson again, updating him on this development. "This strengthens our position significantly," he confirmed. "If the firm's investigation substantiates financial impropriety, it will impact both the division of assets and potentially any claims Nathan might make regarding spousal support. Is there anything else I should be doing at this stage?" I asked. "You've been remarkably thorough," Patterson assured me. "Now we wait for Nathan's formal response to the divorce petition. Given the circumstances, I anticipate he'll move quickly to resolve this rather than risk protracted proceedings that could further damage his professional standing." The anticipated response came sooner than expected. Late that afternoon, my phone displayed Nathan's number for the first time since the dinner. I let it ring through to voicemail, unwilling to engage directly until I had processed the potential scenarios such a conversation might entail. His message was tightly controlled, the lawyer in him evidently reasserting dominance over the exposed adulterer. "Elise, we need to discuss terms. Your approach last night was unnecessarily public and potentially damaging to both our interests. I'm prepared to offer a reasonable settlement if we can handle this discreetly moving forward. Call me back." The audacity of suggesting I had been the one to choose public disclosure almost made me laugh. I forwarded the message to Patterson, without responding directly to Nathan. "Classic deflection," Patterson commented when he called minutes later. "He's attempting to regain control of the narrative. I recommend continued non-engagement except through legal channels. Let him communicate through his attorney." "And if he doesn't retain representation immediately?" "He will," Patterson assured me. "The firm's investigation alone necessitates it. My guess is he already has someone but is attempting to establish direct communication with you first, hoping to leverage emotional connection to secure better terms." The assessment proved accurate. By evening, I received notification that Nathan had retained Gerald Weston, a divorce attorney known for representing high-earning professionals. Patterson seemed pleased with this development. Weston is aggressive, but practical. He won't waste time on unwinnable positions just to run up billable hours. That night, unable to sleep, I wandered downstairs to find my mother similarly restless, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and old family photographs spread before her. "I've been thinking about patterns," she said as I joined her, indicating the photos. "How we repeat what we know, even when it harms us." The images chronicled various family gatherings, holidays, graduations, weddings. In many, Vanessa and I stood side by side, our physical resemblance notable despite the 3-year age difference between us. I had always been the serious one, Vanessa more demonstrative, more openly emotional. "What patterns are you seeing?" I asked, though I suspected I knew. My mother selected a photo from my high school graduation. In it, Vanessa stood slightly apart from the family group, her expression a complex blend of pride and something else, a shadow across her features. That, with hindsight, looked remarkably like envy. "Vanessa has always wanted what you have," she said simply. "Your academic achievements, your confidence, your stability." Not because she valued those things herself, necessarily, but because they represented a kind of validation she craved. Considered this perspective, testing it against my memories of our relationship. There had always been a competitive undercurrent between us, subtle but persistent. When I received my architecture scholarship, Vanessa abruptly changed her college major. When I began dating Nathan, she cycled through a series of increasingly successful boyfriends, as if matching my relationship milestone for milestone. That doesn't excuse her actions, I noted. No, it doesn't. my mother agreed firmly. Understanding isn't the same as justifying, but I wonder if recognizing the pattern might help you process what's happened. You think she pursued Nathan primarily because he was mine. I think she pursued what she perceived as happiness, and your life has always represented her benchmark for that concept. My mother gathered the photos, restoring them to their album with careful hands. The tragedy is that she's never recognized her own unique value. She's always measuring herself against an external standard, usually you. This insight didn't diminish my anger, but it provided a framework that somehow made the betrayal less personally devastating. Not because it wasn't intensely personal in its impact, but because the motivations behind it seemed suddenly less about me specifically and more about long-established patterns I hadn't created or controlled. What happens now, between you and Vanessa? I asked, realizing I didn't know what my mother intended regarding her relationship with her other daughter. My mother's expression tightened. I am still her mother. That doesn't change. But there will be consequences and boundaries that didn't exist before. Trust, once broken, requires more than apologies to rebuild. The following day brought the first direct contact from Vanessa. Not a call, but a handwritten letter delivered by courier to my mother's house. The formal delivery method itself spoke volumes about her awareness that electronic communications would likely be shared with attorneys. The letter began with a predictable preamble about unintended consequences and complicated emotions. I never meant to hurt you, she wrote, a statement so fundamentally absurd given the methodical nature of the deception that it undermined any genuine sentiment that followed. Nathan and I recognized that our approach was deeply hurtful, she continued. We should have been honest from the beginning about our feelings. The way things unfolded at the anniversary dinner was not what we intended. What struck me most was the letter's careful avoidance of actual apology. Nowhere did the words, "I'm sorry," appear. Instead, Vanessa focused on feelings and intentions, positioning herself and Nathan as people who had simply followed their hearts. Perhaps clumsily, but with authentic emotion. The final paragraph revealed the letter's true purpose. Nathan is devastated by the potential damage to his career. We hope you'll consider the impact of further disclosures and potential litigation. Despite everything, I know you wouldn't want to destroy what he's built professionally. I passed the letter to my mother without comment. She read it quickly, her expression hardening with each line. She's attempting to manipulate you into containing the professional fallout, she observed, handing it back. No acknowledgement of the premeditated nature of their actions, no acceptance of responsibility for the consequences. I expected nothing less, I admitted. The letter is primarily for potential evidence in any dispute. It establishes their narrative early, that they were motivated by genuine feelings rather than calculated deception. I placed the letter in a folder with other documentation, neither responding to it nor discarding it. Whatever genuine emotion I might eventually need to process regarding my sister's betrayal would have to wait. For now, practical considerations took precedence. Those practical considerations accelerated dramatically the following morning when James Patterson called with unexpected news. Nathan's attorney has reached out with a settlement proposal, he reported, undisguised surprise coloring his voice. It's unusually favorable to your interests. How so? I asked, immediately suspicious. They're offering a clean division of assets with you receiving the house entirely, plus 60% of the investment portfolio. Nathan would retain his retirement accounts and personal property. What's the catch? Such generosity seemed entirely out of character, particularly given Nathan's initial voicemail suggesting reasonable terms. The only condition is absolute confidentiality regarding the circumstances of the divorce and any financial discoveries you've made. They're proposing a mutual non-disclosure agreement with significant penalties for violation. The motivation became instantly clear. The firm's investigation must have uncovered something serious, I surmised. Nathan's trying to protect his professional reputation and potentially avoid criminal charges. That would be my assessment as well, Patterson agreed. The speed and terms of this offer suggest he's prioritizing damage control over financial advantage. What do you recommend? Consider the offer seriously, but I'd suggest we counter with additional provisions. Patterson's tone turned thoughtful. While the financial terms are generous, we should ensure the non-disclosure agreement is carefully crafted to protect your interests as well. The following week passed in a whirlwind of legal negotiations and practical arrangements. I returned, briefly to our house, now legally secured as mine alone under the proposed settlement, to assess what I wanted to keep versus what I would replace. The space felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, filled with memories now colored by the knowledge of deception. In the master bedroom, I discovered evidence of hasty packing. Drawers partially emptied, spaces in the closet where Nathan's custom suits had hung. He had apparently returned at some point, likely while I was meeting with Patterson, to retrieve essential items. The violation of space bothered me less than I'd anticipated. In fact, there was something cleansing about seeing the physical removal of his presence, the concrete evidence of separation. Working methodically, I cataloged items of actual sentimental value versus those that merely represented the life we'd constructed together. The distinction proved illuminating. Many possessions I had once considered important revealed themselves as status symbols or concessions to Nathan's preferences rather than objects that brought me genuine pleasure or comfort. Arranged for the remaining furniture to be professionally cleaned, removing any trace of the life previously lived within these walls. The master bathroom, where I'd heard my sister's laughter mingling with my husband's that fateful day, received particular attention. New fixtures, new paint, new energy altogether. Diane arrived midway through this process, appearing at the front door with lunch and practical support. "The vultures are circling for details," she reported, referring to our social circle's inevitable curiosity. "I've been deflecting questions, but people are desperate to understand what happened." "Let them wonder," I replied, surprisingly unbothered by the prospect of gossip. "The truth is documented where it matters. Beyond that, I have no interest in managing public perception." "That's healthier than I managed during my divorce," Diane admitted. "I spent months crafting the perfect social media presence to prove I was winning the breakup." "I've removed my social media accounts entirely," I told her. "Temporarily, at least. I don't need the distraction of performing recovery." For an audience, this decision had been among my first after the confrontation, a deliberate withdrawal from platforms where appearances were curated and reality distorted. The freedom from that particular expectation had been immediately liberating. 10 days. After the anniversary dinner, the settlement agreement was finalized. Nathan accepted our counter-proposal with minimal resistance, the financial concessions apparently less important than securing the non-disclosure provisions. The divorce would proceed uncontested, with irreconcilable differences cited as the official reason. My investigative documentation would remain sealed, but available should Nathan violate any terms of our agreement. Robert provided periodic updates on the firm's internal situation. Nathan had resigned his partnership rather than face the completed audit findings. The official announcement cited personal reasons for his departure, but the timing left little doubt about the actual circumstances. Several major clients had been quietly transferred to other partners, the transitions managed with careful discretion to minimize disruption. Vanessa had indeed moved to Chicago as planned, though not to the Gold Coast apartment she and Nathan had highlighted in their preparations. According to my mother, who maintained minimal contact with her, Vanessa had taken a small rental in Wicker Park, far from the prestigious address they had envisioned together. Whether she and Nathan remained a couple was unclear, and I discovered, increasingly irrelevant to my peace of mind. 3 weeks after the anniversary dinner, I returned to work, the brief absence explained to colleagues as personal matters requiring attention. My firm had been understanding, the senior partners expressing support without pressing for details. The architecture projects that had been temporarily reassigned were returned to my supervision, their familiar challenges providing welcome mental engagement outside my personal circumstances. On my first day back, I found a small package on my desk, a plant in a handcrafted ceramic pot, accompanied by a note from my team. Growth requires both strong foundations and the courage to reach upward. Welcome back. The simple gesture brought unexpected tears, a reminder that while certain connections had been severed, others remained intact and supportive. That evening, I met with a real estate agent, not to sell my house as Nathan had planned, but to discuss renovations that would transform it into a space truly reflective of my preferences. The colonial style Nathan had insisted upon would give way to more contemporary lines, open spaces, abundant natural light. "You're essentially redesigning the entire interior," the agent observed, reviewing my preliminary sketches with professional interest. "Have you considered whether starting fresh with a new property might be more practical?" "This isn't about practicality," I explained, surprising myself with the realization as I spoke it. "It's about reclamation. This house represents a significant investment, not just financially, but emotionally. Rather than abandoning it, I'm choosing to transform it." The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. The house, like my life, contained good bones and potential beneath the structure others had imposed upon it. The renovation would be extensive, requiring temporary relocation during the most disruptive phases, but the result would be authentically mine in a way the original design had never been. 6 weeks after the anniversary dinner, I received a call from James Patterson with curious news. "Nathan has accepted a position with a firm in Seattle," he reported. Apparently, a former client offered him an opportunity outside traditional legal practice. The geographical distance felt appropriate, a physical manifestation of the emotional separation that had occurred. Whatever future Nathan built with or without Vanessa would unfold far from Chicago, from the firm he'd compromised, from the social circles that had witnessed his exposure. That same week, my mother invited me to dinner, her tone suggesting she had something specific to discuss. I arrived to find her kitchen filled with familiar aromas: beef noodle soup simmering on the stove, scallion pancakes cooling on the counter. The comfort foods of my childhood appeared whenever she believed. Emotional fortification was required. "I spoke with Vanessa yesterday," she began once we were seated with steaming bowls before us. "She's accepted a position in Portland. She leaves next week." "Portland," I repeated, mentally calculating the distance from Seattle. "Interesting. Choice." "She says there's nothing remaining between her and Nathan," my mother continued carefully. "Apparently, the relationship collapsed almost immediately after your confrontation. Without the forbidden element, the excitement disappeared." The information produced no particular emotional response beyond mild vindication of my mother's earlier assessment. Their relationship had never been about genuine connection, but about patterns and perceptions. Vanessa wanting what I had, Nathan seeking something that felt new and affirming without requiring actual growth on his part. "She asked if you might consider speaking with her before she leaves," my mother added, watching my reaction closely. "She says she has things she needs to say to you directly." I considered the request, examining my own readiness for such an encounter. The initial shock and anger had subsided into something more complex. Not forgiveness, certainly, but perhaps a readiness to understand the full dimensions of what had occurred. "I'll think about it," I promised, neither committing to nor rejecting the possibility. "I'm not sure what purpose it would serve for either of us right now." My mother nodded, accepting this answer without pushing further. "You know, when your father died, I thought my life was ending too," she said after several minutes of companionable silence. "I couldn't imagine reconstructing meaning from what remained. But that's exactly what I did, piece by piece. Choice, by choice. I recognized the parallel she was drawing, not equating death with divorce, but acknowledging that both required rebuilding after fundamental rupture. The reconstruction is well underway, I assured her, and the foundation is stronger than before. 2 months after the anniversary dinner, I signed the final paperwork dissolving my marriage to Nathan Reynolds. The procedure was clinical and efficient, conducted through attorneys without requiring our physical presence in the same room. 10 years summarized and concluded in signatures and legal terminology, assets divided, futures separated. That evening, I sat alone on the back deck of my house, now backed by legal documentation rather than just emotional claim. The renovation would begin the following week. Contractors scheduled to implement the plans I'd finalized with an architectural colleague. The Japanese maple I'd planted when we first moved in had flourished despite neglect, its delicate leaves catching the last light of day in crimson illumination. My phone chimed with a text from Diane. "Official Freedom Day? Celebration dinner tomorrow?" I smiled at her phrasing. Freedom Day. There was truth in that framing, though the freedom had begun the moment I'd decided to investigate rather than simply react, to strategize rather than surrender to the narrative Nathan and Vanessa had scripted. As twilight deepened into evening, I found myself reflecting not on what I'd lost, but on what I'd reclaimed: dignity, autonomy, the ability to choose my own path forward without accommodation or compromise. The betrayal that might have defined me had instead revealed me, exposing strengths I hadn't fully recognized and resilience I hadn't needed to test. Whatever came next would be shaped by my choices rather than reactions to another's deception. The house would be transformed according to my vision. My career would progress along paths I selected. Relationships, friendship, family, perhaps eventually romance, would develop authentically, without the distortions that had characterized my marriage. I texted Diane back, "Absolutely. Not an ending we're celebrating, but a beginning." The response came immediately. The best kind of celebration. Sitting in the gathering darkness, I felt something settle inside me. Not completion, but alignment. The story Nathan had tried to write, with me cast as unsuspecting victim or amicable departing spouse, had been thoroughly revised. In its place stood a narrative of my own creation, one where betrayal served as catalyst rather than conclusion. Ani. Our anniversary, my husband had announced his affair, never knowing I had already prepared for the aftermath. But the truly important preparation hadn't been the legal documents or strategic planning. It had been the internal transformation from shocked discoverer to deliberate architect of my own response and recovery. That transformation continued, each decision building upon the last to create something new from the materials of disruption. Not despite the betrayal, but because of how I had chosen to meet it, with clarity, with purpose, with the unshakable certainty that while others might attempt to write my story, only I would determine its true direction. The invitation arrived on a crisp October morning, delivered to my office rather than my home. The heavy cream envelope bore the embossed logo of the Chicago Architectural Foundation, its formal appearance suggesting something beyond routine. Correspondence. Inside, an elegantly designed card announced the annual Design Excellence Awards, with my name listed among the nominees for Residential Renovation of the Year. I traced my fingers over the embossed lettering, a quiet sense of validation warming my chest. The nomination recognized the complete transformation of my house, a project that had evolved from personal reclamation to professional showcase. What had begun as therapeutic redesign had developed into something unexpected, a statement piece that merged architectural innovation with psychological restoration. "Congratulations are in order, I see," Christine, my firm's managing partner, commented from my office doorway, holding an identical envelope. "The committee sent notification to the firm as well." "Thank you," I replied, still processing the recognition. I hadn't expected this outcome when I started the renovations. Christine smiled knowingly. The best designs often emerge from personal necessity rather than professional ambition. Your project speaks to something universal, the reconfiguration of space after disruption. That afternoon, I walked through the transformed house that had earned this recognition, seeing it with fresh eyes. The colonial facade remained, a nod to neighborhood continuity, but inside, everything had changed. Load-bearing walls had been repositioned to create an open flow between spaces. The kitchen now featured a central island that encouraged gathering, rather than the formal dining setup Nathan had preferred. Floor-to-ceiling windows in the rear connected interior and exterior spaces, blurring the boundary between the house and the Japanese maple garden I'd expanded. Most significantly, I'd converted the master bedroom, the site of discovery that had initiated my journey, into a light-filled studio where I now developed preliminary designs for client projects. The new primary bedroom occupied what had been a rarely used formal living room, its orientation capturing morning light that Nathan had considered too bright for comfort. Every change represented a conscious choice rather than compromise or accommodation. The house had become a physical manifestation of my psychological journey. Structure maintained, but purpose reimagined. Foundations preserved while creating entirely new possibilities for living. When I submitted the renovation for consideration, in the awards program, I'd included an architect's statement that connected the technical aspects of the redesign with its emotional underpinnings. Architecture at its most meaningful addresses not just how spaces function, but how they facilitate healing, growth, and transformation. This project explores how physical reconstruction can parallel and support personal reconstruction after profound disruption. The nomination committee had apparently found this perspective compelling, elevating my personal project among submissions from established design firms. Whatever the outcome of the final selection, the recognition itself marked a milestone in my professional and personal integration. That evening, I shared the news with my mother over dinner at her home. She'd recently begun dating again, a widowed professor of literature she'd met at a community lecture series, and had her own quiet glow of renewal about her. "I've been thinking about patterns again," she said, referencing our conversation from the aftermath of the anniversary dinner. How breaking them requires not just recognition, but active redirection. "Are you referring to the house or to my life in general?" I asked, recognizing the dual application. "Both, I suppose." She refilled our teacups with practiced grace. "You could have simply redecorated, changed surface elements while maintaining the underlying structure. Instead, you fundamentally reimagined how the space could function." The parallel was obvious. After the divorce, I could have sought superficial changes, new relationship, new appearance, external adjustments that left core patterns intact. Instead, I'd engaged in deeper reconstruction, examining assumptions and habits that had shaped my choices long before Nathan entered my life. This process had revealed uncomfortable insights about my own participation in creating the relationship that eventually betrayed me. I had valued stability to the point of ignoring warning signs, prioritized harmony over authenticity, mistaken control for care. These recognitions didn't excuse Nathan and Vanessa's betrayal, but they illuminated how I might avoid similar dynamics moving forward. "Speaking of patterns," my mother continued carefully, "Vanessa called yesterday. The mention of my sister no longer triggered the visceral reaction it once had. Time and distance had transformed raw betrayal into something more complex, not forgiveness exactly, but a placing of the experience into broader context. "How is Portland treating her?" I asked, genuinely curious rather than sarcastic. "She's leaving, actually. Accepted a position in Chicago again." This unexpected development gave me pause. "Is she concerned about my reaction to her return?" "That's partly why she called. She wanted me to gauge whether you would object to her moving back." She says she'll decline the offer if you feel it would be too difficult. The consideration surprised me. Previous communications from Vanessa had centered on her experiences, her justifications, her needs. This represented something new: awareness of impact, recognition of boundaries. "I have no objection," I said after reflection. "Chicago is large enough for both of us to build separate lives." That's what I told her, but she wanted me to ask directly. My mother hesitated, then added, "She mentioned she's been seeing a therapist regularly, working on understanding her competitive relationship with you and the patterns that led to her choices." This information settled somewhere between vindication and cautious hope. Whatever transformative work Vanessa might be undertaking wouldn't erase what had happened, but it suggested the possibility of healthier future interactions. "She also asked if you received her letter," my mother added. "What letter?" "Apparently she sent something to your office about 2 months ago. When you didn't respond, she assumed you weren't ready for communication." I hadn't received any correspondence from Vanessa since the manipulative note delivered after the anniversary dinner. Whatever she had sent recently had never reached me. Perhaps intercepted by well-meaning staff or lost in transit. "I'll check with my assistant," I promised, uncertain whether I felt disappointment or relief at the missed connection. Later that week, I found myself at a crossroads of another kind. Martin Davis, a landscape architect I'd collaborated with on several projects, had finally asked the question that had been building between us for months. "Would you consider having dinner with me?" he'd asked as we completed a client presentation. "Not to discuss work," he clarified with characteristic directness. Martin had entered my professional circle during the house renovation, recommended for the garden redesign by a mutual colleague. Our working relationship had developed into friendship, marked by thoughtful conversations and shared aesthetic sensibilities. The potential for something beyond friendship had remained unacknowledged, but increasingly evident in our interactions. My hesitation wasn't about Martin himself. His integrity, intelligence, and genuine warmth had been consistently demonstrated over months of collaboration. Rather, it stemmed from uncertainty about my own readiness to navigate romantic territory again, particularly with someone connected to my professional world. "I'd like that," I found myself answering. The decision, feeling right despite lingering apprehension. But I should mention that I'm still processing certain experiences. "I'm aware of your recent history," he acknowledged, neither invasive nor dismissive. "I'm not proposing we rush into anything complicated, just dinner, conversation, and whatever develops naturally from there." The dinner itself proved surprisingly comfortable, Martin's thoughtful questions and attentive listening creating space for authentic exchange rather than performative dating behaviors. We discussed architecture and art, personal histories, and professional aspirations, moving easily between serious topics and genuine laughter. "May I ask something potentially sensitive?" Martin ventured as we shared dessert. When I nodded, he continued, "Has your experience with betrayal made you more hesitant about relationships in general, or specifically about trusting men?" The question was direct but not intrusive, seeking understanding rather than advantage. I considered it carefully before responding. "Neither, actually," I realized as I articulated my thoughts. What it's made me is more attentive to my own patterns. The betrayal was painful, certainly, but the more significant revelation was recognizing how I had participated in creating a relationship where authentic connection had been replaced by performance and projection. Martin nodded thoughtfully. "That's more nuanced than many people achieve after such experiences. Most either withdraw completely or rush into replacement relationships without examining the underlying dynamics." I had excellent support, I acknowledged. Thinking of my mother, Diane, James Patterson, and others who had provided perspective during the reconstruction process. And architecture proved unexpectedly therapeutic. The principles of sound structure apply to relationships as well as buildings. As the evening concluded, Martin walked me to my car without presumption or pressure. The goodbye was warm but restrained, leaving space for whatever might develop naturally. "I enjoyed this," he said simply. "So did I replied, meaning it completely. The exchange lacked drama or intensity, yet contained something I had forgotten existed, the quiet pleasure of authentic connection without strategic calculation. Whether it developed into something more significant remained to be seen, but the experience itself represented another milestone in my ongoing reconstruction. The following day, I received an unexpected visit at my office. My assistant, Lydia, appeared with uncharacteristic hesitation at my door. "Ms. Chen, there's someone asking to see you. I explained that you're preparing for the Henderson presentation, but she's quite insistent." Lydia lowered her voice slightly. "It's your sister." The announcement sent a ripple of surprise through me. Vanessa had respected the unspoken boundary between us for 18 months, making no attempt at direct contact beyond the initial letter and her recent outreach through our mother. "Did she mention why she's here?" I asked, buying time to process this development. "She said it concerns something important that can't be discussed over the phone. She also mentioned a letter she sent previously that you might not have received." I considered the options, weighing professional disruption against the potential value of hearing whatever Vanessa felt important enough to deliver in person. "I can give her 15 minutes, I decided. "Please show her in." Vanessa appeared. In my doorway moments later, noticeably changed from my last glimpse of her at the anniversary dinner. The polished glamour that had been her signature had been replaced by a more subdued, authentic presentation. Her expression held apprehension, rather than the defensive confidence I'd anticipated. "Thank you for seeing me," she began, remaining standing until I gestured toward the chair opposite my desk. "I wasn't sure you would." 15 minutes between meetings was available, I replied neutrally. "Mom mentioned you're considering moving." "Back to Chicago." Vanessa nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "That's partly why I wanted to see you directly. Before accepting the position, I needed to know if my return would cause you additional pain." The consideration seemed genuine rather than performative, lacking the manipulative undertone that had characterized her post-anniversary letter. "My life is established," I said simply. "Your presence in Chicago won't disrupt that." "Thank you." She hesitated before continuing. "I also wanted to deliver this personally." She removed an envelope from her bag, placing it on my desk. "It's similar to what I sent 2 months ago, but that clearly didn't reach you." I made no move to open it, maintaining professional composure. "What does it contain?" What I should have said 18 months ago and many times since. Vanessa met my gaze directly, her expression stripped of artifice. A genuine apology, without excuses or justifications. An acknowledgement of the harm I caused and the trust I violated. The straightforward description surprised me. The Vanessa I had known would have embellished with emotional appeals and dramatic declarations. "What changed?" I asked, genuinely curious about the transformation evident in her demeanor. "Therapy primarily," she admitted. "After everything fell apart with Nathan, which happened almost immediately after your confrontation, I was forced to examine my patterns. The therapist helped me recognize my lifelong habit of measuring my worth against yours, of wanting what you had without understanding why you had it. The assessment aligned remarkably with my mother's earlier insights about competitive dynamics between us." "And Nathan? Have you had contact with him since?" "None since Portland," she confirmed. "The relationship imploded spectacularly once the secrecy element disappeared. Without the forbidden aspect, we discovered we had very little authentic connection." She hesitated before adding, "He wasn't well, Elise. After losing his position at the firm, he became increasingly bitter, blaming everyone but himself for the consequences of his actions." This assessment matched what I'd heard through limited channels about Nathan's professional trajectory after leaving Chicago. His position in Seattle had lasted barely 6 months before dissolving under circumstances not publicly disclosed, but rumored to involve similar financial improprieties to those discovered in Chicago. I'm not asking for forgiveness or reconciliation, Vanessa continued with unexpected clarity. Those may not be possible, and demanding them would center my needs over the harm I caused. I just wanted you to know that I recognize the gravity of my betrayal, and am working to understand and change the patterns that led to it. The statement contained none of the manipulative elements I had anticipated. No implied obligation to forgive, no minimizing of impact, no subtle shifting of responsibility. Whatever work Vanessa had undertaken appeared to have produced genuine insight rather than strategic positioning. Thank you for telling me directly, I replied, neither accepting nor rejecting her apology but acknowledging the communication itself. I appreciate your consideration regarding the move back to Chicago. Vanessa stood, respecting the time limitation I'd established. The letter contains more detail, including my therapy insights about our family dynamics. Read it if and when you're ready. There's no expectation of response. As she reached the door, she turned back briefly. I saw the announcement about your nomination for the design award. The photographs of the renovation are remarkable. You've created something beautiful from difficult circumstances. The observation wasn't delivered with envy or competition, but with what appeared to be genuine appreciation. As she departed, I felt something shift slightly in my perception of our relationship. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the first tentative step toward a new understanding of our shared history and separate futures. The Design Excellence Award ceremony took place on a snowy December evening at the Chicago Cultural Center, its Preston Bradley Hall dome providing a spectacular backdrop for the architectural community's annual celebration. I attended with my mother and Diane, both of whom had witnessed every stage of my reconstruction process. Regardless of the outcome, this nomination represents significant recognition, Diane reminded me as we entered the historic space, especially for a personal project competing against corporate submissions. The evening progressed through various categories: commercial innovation, historic preservation, urban planning, before reaching residential transformation. As the nominees in my category were announced, accompanied by projected images of each project, I felt a curious detachment from the competitive aspect of the moment. The nomination itself had already validated the integration of my personal and professional journeys. When my name was announced as the category winner, the surprise momentarily overwhelmed me. The judge's citation particularly resonated. This project demonstrates architecture's potential as both physical and psychological healing. A thoughtful reconceptualization of space that honors existing structure while creating entirely new possibilities for inhabitants. As I accepted the award, I found myself acknowledging the complex journey that had led to this moment. Architecture teaches us that transformation doesn't require complete demolition, I noted in brief remarks. Sometimes the strongest structures emerge from reimagining rather than replacing, from identifying what remains sound despite damage and building upon those foundations with new vision and purpose. The parallel to personal reconstruction wasn't explicitly stated, but clearly understood by those familiar with my story, including my mother, whose quiet pride was evident from her seat in the audience. Following the ceremony, I spoke briefly with one of the jurors who had championed my project. What distinguished your submission, she explained, was the integration of technical innovation with emotional narrative. You created not just a beautiful space, but a case study in architectural response to life disruption. Her observation articulated something I had felt but not fully expressed, that the house transformation represented not just personal healing, but potentially valuable insight for others navigating similar reconstruction processes. On the drive home, my mother suggested we take a slight detour past the illuminated Buckingham Fountain, a tradition from my childhood when special occasions warranted celebration. As we watched the water dance against the backdrop of Chicago's skyline, she offered a perspective that crystallized the evening's significance. "You've come full circle," she observed, "but not to the same point where you began. Rather, you've completed a spiral that appears similar from certain angles, but actually exists on an entirely different level." The geometric metaphor resonated deeply. My life had indeed returned to certain familiar coordinates: professional success, potential, romantic connection, even navigating complex family dynamics with Vanessa. Yet each of these elements now existed in transformed context, informed by hard-won wisdom and deliberate reconstruction. 4 days after the award ceremony, Martin and I had our third dinner together, this time at my transformed home rather than a restaurant. The setting created a different quality of interaction, more personal, more revealing of my daily reality beyond professional presentation. "The photographs don't capture the full experience," he commented, moving through the spaces with architectural appreciation. "There's a coherence between elements that only becomes apparent when you're physically present in the space." "That was intentional," I explained as we settled in the kitchen area I'd designed for both function and connection. "I wanted continuity despite significant reconfiguration, a through line connecting what was with what is." The evening unfolded with comfortable conversation and shared meal preparation, the collaborative cooking process revealing compatibility beyond our professional connection. As we lingered over dessert and coffee, Martin broached the subject we'd been circling. "I've enjoyed getting to know you these past weeks," he said, characteristically direct. "I'd like to continue exploring what might develop between us, if you're open to that possibility." The question arrived without pressure or expectation, offered as potential rather than demand. 18 months earlier, I might have hesitated, protective of newly reconstructed boundaries. Now, I found myself responding with equal directness. "I am open to that," I confirmed, with the understanding that I value transparency and authentic communication above almost everything else. "Those align with my own priorities," he assured me. "Given our respective histories, I think we both appreciate the value of building something sound from the beginning rather than attempting repairs later." The architectural metaphor made me smile, recognizing the professional language that had become personally meaningful to us both. "Solid foundation, thoughtful design, quality materials," I agreed. "Principles that apply equally to buildings and relationships." Later that evening, after Martin departed with arrangements for our next meeting already established, I found myself drawn to the studio that had once been the site of Betrayal's discovery. Now transformed into creative space, it held no lingering negative energy, but rather served as daily reminder of possibility emerging from disruption. On my design table lay preliminary sketches for a potential new project, a community center, focused on supporting women rebuilding lives after relationship trauma. The concept had developed from conversations with Diane about creating architectural spaces specifically designed to facilitate transition and renewal. As I reviewed the sketches, I realized they contained elements adapted from my own home transformation, open, sightlines that created transparency between spaces, flexible boundaries that could be adjusted according to changing needs, deliberate integration of past and present through material choices and structural elements. The designs represented another form of full circle, translating personal experience into professional innovation that might benefit others navigating similar journeys. Architecture had helped heal my disrupted life. Perhaps my architectural insights could now contribute to others' healing processes. The following morning, I finally opened Vanessa's letter, ready to receive whatever it contained, without being destabilized by its contents. The handwritten pages detailed her therapeutic insights about our relationship, acknowledging patterns of competition and envy she had never previously recognized, much less addressed. "I defined my worth through comparison rather than connection," she wrote. "Seeing you as benchmark rather than sister, competitor rather than ally. The betrayal with Nathan represented the culmination of lifelong pattern, taking what was yours without building what was genuinely mine. The insight suggested significant self-reflection rather than superficial remorse. While the letter didn't erase history or automatically restore trust, it offered possibility of new understanding between us, not returning to previous dynamics, but potentially establishing healthier interaction based on reality rather than projection. I composed a brief response acknowledging receipt of her letter and expressing appreciation for her direct communication. Without promising reconciliation or forgiveness, I indicated willingness for limited contact following her return to Chicago, perhaps coffee in a neutral location where we might begin careful conversation about our separate journeys. As I sealed the envelope containing this measured response, I recognized another aspect of the spiral my mother had described, returning to engagement with my sister, but from entirely different perspective and position. The interaction would be grounded in new boundaries and expectations rather than habitual patterns, informed by hard-won wisdom rather than automatic family roles. That evening, I stood in my transformed garden watching snow begin to dust the Japanese maple that had witnessed both betrayal's discovery and renewal's progression. The tree's delicate structure stood in stark relief against the winter sky, its bare branches simultaneously vulnerable and resilient, dormant but alive with potential for spring's renewal. 18 months after the anniversary dinner that had demolished my carefully constructed life, I found myself occupying spaces, physical, professional, relational, that I could never have envisioned during those early days of shock and strategic response. The reconstruction process had created something neither completely new nor merely repaired, but thoughtfully transformed, honoring essential foundations while reimagining possibilities for inhabitants. The integration of this experience into my professional identity had produced unexpected recognition. The careful rebuilding of personal boundaries had created space for potential new connection with Martin. Even the painful severance with Vanessa had evolved toward possibility of new understanding, if not traditional reconciliation. None of these developments erased what had happened at that anniversary dinner. The public announcement of betrayal, the strategic response I had fortunately prepared, the fundamental disruption of relationships I had believed secure. Rather, they represented how thoroughly I had managed to incorporate that experience into a life reconstructed with intention rather than defined by reaction. On our anniversary, my husband had announced his affair, never knowing I had the divorce papers ready. But the truly remarkable story wasn't the confrontation itself, the shocking revelation or my prepared response, but rather the reconstruction that followed. Not just survival after betrayal, but transformation. Not just rebuilding what was lost, but reimagining what could be. That transformation continued, each decision building upon previous choices to create something I now recognized as authentically mine. A life designed according to my values, rather than inherited expectations or accommodation to others' preferences. The spiral continued upward, returning to familiar coordinates but always at new elevation, integrating experience without being limited by it. In architectural terms, I had created not just renovation, but reimagination, preserving structural integrity while fundamentally reconceiving purpose and possibility. In personal terms, I had discovered capacity not just for resilience, but for genuine reinvention, becoming not despite experience, but because of how I chose to incorporate it into my ongoing construction of self. And that, I reflected as snowflakes, gathered on the Japanese maple's graceful branches, represented the most meaningful full circle of all. 5 years to the day after that fateful anniversary dinner, I found myself standing before an audience at the Women's Leadership Conference in downtown Chicago. The room was filled with professional women from various fields, law, medicine, business, arts, gathered to discuss resilience and reinvention in both personal and professional contexts. The title of my talk today is Architectural Principles. For Life Reconstruction, I began, surveying the attentive faces. 5 years ago, I experienced what felt like catastrophic structural failure in my personal life. Today, I want to share not just what collapsed, but what I chose to build in its place. The journey from that anniversary dinner to this podium had been neither linear nor simple. There had been setbacks amid the progress, moments of doubt within the certainty. Yet, standing there, I recognized how thoroughly the experience had transformed not just my circumstances, but my fundamental approach to life design. When architects assess damaged structures, I continued, we don't just examine what failed, but why it failed and what remained sound despite the damage. The same principles apply to personal reconstruction. As I spoke, I noticed a familiar face in the third row. Vanessa, her presence unexpected but somehow appropriate for this milestone. Reflection. Our relationship had evolved over the years into something neither of us could have anticipated during those raw early days. Not the unreflective closeness of our youth, but a careful, honest connection between two women who had undertaken significant, individual work. Our monthly coffee meetings had gradually expanded to include occasional family dinners with our mother. The competitive dynamic had been replaced by mutual recognition of our distinct strengths and separate paths. Vanessa had established herself in nonprofit management, recently accepting a position working with young women navigating difficult transitions. Her own painful experiences transformed into professional compassion. The foundation of successful reconstruction, I told the audience, is honest assessment of what was real versus what was projection or performance. We can't build authentically upon illusions, no matter how comforting they might have been. This principle had guided my relationship with Martin, which had developed with deliberate care over the past 4 years. Our marriage the previous spring had been a small, meaningful ceremony in the garden behind my transformed home, witnessed by those who had supported my reconstruction journey. The relationship we built together emphasized transparency, separate wholeness alongside genuine connection, mutual growth without codependence. Nathan's trajectory had followed a different path. After Seattle came positions of decreasing prominence. In Denver, then Phoenix, his professional reputation diminished by repeated patterns he seemed unable to recognize, much less address. Our paths crossed only once, 3 years after the divorce, when a mutual friend's funeral brought us momentarily into the same space. The brief exchange had been civil but revelatory. I saw clearly how little remained of the connection we had, once shared, how thoroughly we had become strangers to one another. The most valuable skill in reconstruction, I continued in my presentation, is distinguishing between load-bearing walls and decorative elements, between what must be preserved for structural integrity and what can be reimagined without compromising the whole. This distinction had guided my professional evolution as well. The award-winning home renovation had led to a specialized focus within our firm, creating a division dedicated to spaces designed specifically for transition and healing. The community, Center for Women Rebuilding After Relationship Trauma, had been completed the previous year, its thoughtful design earning recognition beyond architectural circles for its integration of psychological principles with physical space. Reconstruction isn't about erasing difficult experiences, I emphasized, approaching my conclusion. It's about incorporating them thoughtfully into a more intentional design. The Japanese art of kintsugi repairs broken pottery with gold, highlighting, rather than hiding the damage. The result isn't merely repaired but transformed, more valuable precisely because it has been broken and mindfully restored. As I spoke these words, I thought of the relationships present in my life now. My marriage to Martin, the reconstructed connection with Vanessa, deepened friendships with Diane and others who had witnessed my journey, professional collaborations, built on shared values rather than convenience or advantage. Each relationship had been approached with greater intentionality, clearer boundaries, and more authentic engagement than I had known how to create before my life's structural failure forced deeper understanding. The anniversary dinner where my husband announced his affair while I held divorce papers ready was undoubtedly dramatic. I acknowledged. But it wasn't the defining moment of my story. The defining moments came afterward, in daily choices to build something authentic rather than merely react to betrayal. As the presentation concluded and appreciative applause filled the room, I recognized the truth in these final words. The dramatic confrontation had initiated the journey, but the meaningful transformation had emerged through countless smaller decisions in the years that followed. Choices about what to preserve, what to release, what to reimagine, what to create. Vanessa approached as the audience dispersed, her expression reflecting the complex history between us. "That was powerful," she said simply. "You've helped more people than you know by sharing your reconstruction journey." Walking together from the conference center into the bright spring afternoon, we represented a different kind of full circle, not returning to what was, but creating something new from the materials of shared history and separate growth. Ultimate evidence that reconstruction, when approached with intention and courage, can create connections stronger and more authentic than what existed before the breaking. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.